Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So we run the class straight till 8 o'clock. And then we'll go small 10-minute standing kirtan and then call it quits for the day. So now we'll see how good a scholar you are. Shaknoti Thaiva.
Shaknoti Thaiva. Yaha.
Sodham.
Sodham.
Prag. Śrīla. Mokshana. Kama. Krodho. Bhavam. Vegam. Sa. Yukta. Sa. Sukhi. Naraha. You devotees did pretty good. So let's see how good you do at the next step now. Saknoti Thaiva Yaha Sodham. Praksharira Vimokshanat. Kama Krodho Bhavam Vegam. Shaknoti Thaiva Yaha Sodham. Praksharira Vimokshanat. Kama Krodho Bhavam Vegam. Sayukta sa sukhi naraha. Shaknoti Thaiva Yaha Sodham. Praksharira Vimokshanat. Kama Krodho Bhavam Vegam. Sayukta sa sukhi naraha. Krama Kodod Bhavam Vegam. Sayuktaha sa sukhi naraha. Krishna is giving us very valuable instructions in this chapter and especially in this verse. Can you imagine that the verse we are reading was spoken 5,000 years ago and prior to that millions of years ago? See the power of the Bhagavad Gita. Because it contains the words of the Lord, people have been reading it since times immemorial. This chapter is called Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. And in this section of this chapter, or the 5th chapter, how the liberated soul is identified is being described. So if we take advantage of this philosophy, we are guaranteed to become liberated and to make progress on the journey back to God. It doesn't matter what nationality you're born in. It doesn't matter which country you're born in. It doesn't matter which caste you're born in. If you take to this process, you're guaranteed to succeed. The advice that Krishna is giving in this verse is very useful for all of us. Krishna is always giving us some practical advice and not theoretical advice. So we should always remember that Krishna's advice is not theoretical. I'm mentioning this because sometimes devotees tend to think, oh, this is impossible for me. I can't do it. Impossible. If the message of the Gita was impossible to practice, we would not be discussing it or studying it. Prabhupada would not have written purport to these verses. So it is practical and attainable by each of us sitting over here. Who is Krishna giving this instruction to? He's giving this instruction to all those who are going to give up their bodies. Krishna says in this verse, before giving up this material body. So are we all going to give up our material bodies, or some of us know the art of keeping it? What's the answer? Sure, there's no exception to the rule. Nobody has learned some magic mantras. So Krishna is saying, before giving up this material body. So what Krishna is saying, before dying, we have to perfect our existence. So what did he say that, what do we have to do to perfect our existence? First point he says, tolerate the urges of the material senses. Is that a problem with any of you? or a near problem. If it's not a problem, we won't discuss it. We'll go on to the next verse. Then Krishna says, check the forces of desire and anger. Is this a problem or no? Desire and anger, have you conquered over that? Yeah. Okay, so Krishna says, check the forces of desire and anger. So Krishna is saying, tolerate the urges of the senses and check the forces of desire and anger. Now generally, people want to know, if I do this, what will I get in exchange? Just like you apply for a job and they say, okay, you're going to work 40 hours a week, but what am I going to get in exchange? And then they say, okay, you're going to get this much salary. So the question is, if I tolerate the urges of the senses, if I check the forces of anger and desire, what am I going to get? Answer is, you become well situated and happy. So if you want real happiness, this is the medium. It's not that you turn to sinful activities. So first of all, Krishna is saying, tolerate the urges of the senses. So the senses are always agitating. Krishna says every living entity is struggling with the mind and the senses. We have eyes, ears, nose, tongue, touch. You have the objects of the senses. With the eyes, it's vision. With the tongue, it's taste. With the nose, it's smell. For the ears, it's sound. For genitals, it's touch. So in the absence of spiritual understanding, we all think that by engaging in these activities of sense enjoyment, I will find pleasure. So Krishna is saying, tolerate the urges of the senses rather than give in to the demands of the senses. The spiritual master, the Supreme Lord, are again and again telling us, don't give in to the whimsical demands of the senses. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's so many stories on this point. How the senses can never be satisfied. King Yayati engaged in sense enjoyment for 10,000 years. He still was frustrated. So Krishna is saying, tolerate. So we find that in our scriptures, the word tolerate comes up again and again. So there are two types of tolerance. There is the internal tolerance and the external tolerance. Internal tolerance means tolerate the disturbance of the mind and the senses. External tolerance refers to tolerating heat and cold, honor, dishonor, victory, defeat. So in this world, honor, dishonor are both there. Just like misery comes without asking. Even a quarter of happiness you get without asking. Lord Kapila Dev, when he was asked to describe the qualities of a devotee, he said, Titikshva karunikaha surla sarvadhina ajita chatra shanta sadva bhasu bhushna. The first quality he mentioned was tolerance. So Lord Kapila said, tolerate, Titikshva karunikaha. It means develop the quality of tolerance. Now then there is internal tolerance, and that is tolerating the mind and the senses. The mind troubles us in a variety of ways. Our mind has unlimited desires. We control the desires with the help of the intelligence. That's one way. Then the mind is the instrument to which the unlimited desires of the senses are being presented. The mind remains disturbed all the time. Our minds in Kali Yuga are full of anxiety. Not only the human species, but also the animal species. The birds, for example, the birds are just seeing, they're eating some grains. But they eat one grain and see left, right, back. Is anybody else coming to attack me? Is this common in Russian birds also? They'll eat one grain and then see back. Right. Is anyone behind me? Why do they see left, right, back? They're worried that somebody else will come and attack them and snatch that grain away. And that's the mentality that we human beings have today. So, the mind is always in anxiety. When you're honored, the mind feels happy. But when you're dishonored, the mind is upset. When someone dies or gets so old or diseased, the mind troubles you. So Krishna is saying, tolerate the urges of the mind and the senses. And how can you tolerate? How can you give up something inferior? You can give us something inferior when you obtain something superior. So when the material senses are demanding sense enjoyment, you should tell them as follows. Tell them, I have tried to serve you since times immemorial, and so far you didn't get satisfied. I gave you everything you wanted. You wanted unlimited meeting? We've had that in so many spaces of life. You wanted unlimited eating? We've had that in so many lives. But you were never satisfied. So what's the guarantee that I'll satisfy you now? So now, let me focus on the prime goal of life. So in reality, the ability to tolerate the forces of the illusory energy comes from our strength of chanting the Hare Krishna Maha. You can't tolerate the mind and the senses unless you engage them in something positive. Just like in North America and all over the world, there is a big propaganda by the government to help people to control taking drugs, to avoid taking drugs. The government has such a big staff, they're spending billions of dollars in advertising and other things to get people to stop taking these drugs. But they're being unsuccessful. Why? When people are not getting a positive alternative. So if you want to have the ability to control the mind and the senses, then you must take to the path of positive control. So the mind and the senses are engaged positively, then you can easily tolerate the urges of the material senses. Just like Govinda Das says, Vaja Hare Manachi Nanda Nandana Abhay Charnara Vindade. My dear mind, you are full of anxiety, but take shelter of the lotus feet of a pure devotee. And then he'll direct you towards the son of Mahananda. And then you'll become free from the miseries of birth and death, free of all anxiety. So as Prabhupada says in the purport, the person who can control the mind and the senses is called a Goswami. These days, Goswami has become a caste. You have Mr. and Mrs. Goswami, they smoke, they drink, they do everything, and still they're Goswamis. So, real Goswami is one who controls the mind and the senses. And when the mind and the senses are controlled, then it becomes easy to control these anarthas. So, Krishna is saying in this verse, please control the mind and the senses. And as we said briefly, but we'll discuss later, this is only possible if we take to the process of devotional service. If the mind and the senses are engaged positively, then they will not gravitate towards negative activities. And if the mind and the senses are not engaged positively, then they will agitate for more and more and more. So a Goswami is one, as Prabhupada explained in the purport, one who can control the mind and the senses. So whether you're in a male body or female body, all of you have the capacity to become a Goswami. So engage the mind and the senses positively. And if you engage the mind and the senses positively, then there will be spiritual progress. This verse is describing how you can become a perfect devotee. So engage the mind and senses constantly in service to the Lord. And do not get discouraged by external insults or internal agitation. So the answer is the mind and the senses can be controlled. Otherwise, why would Krishna devote so many verses to this one theme? We have the example of Haridas Thakur, how the prostitute tried to seduce him and how he was successful. Similarly, we see how Haridas Thakur, he also resisted when Maya Devi came to his palace. Maya Devi came with the intention of seducing him. So the answer is, if you're engaged in chanting and executing a devotional service, then the mind, then you will not agitate and you'll be able to control. Then Krishna says, control the forces of desire and anger. Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mad, Matsarya. These anarthas must be given up. So desire and anger, what does it mean? Give up desire. So should we have no desires? You shouldn't desire that you have a big temple in Moscow. You shouldn't desire that everyone in Moscow have a Bhagavad Gita. Is that bad? So we have who wants to answer. So when the Bhagavad Gita says give up desire and anger, it doesn't mean that give up all types of desire and anger. Give up desires and anger that are based on material realities, but not on the basis of spiritual. So, a devotee desires, but it desires to serve the Lord. Prabhupada all along desired that this Krishna consciousness be established. Prabhupada desired that Krishna consciousness spread. When Prabhupada was in Bombay, once he was coming from the house of Srimati Maharaji. Our house is very near our temple in Juhu. So where the Bombay temple is situated, at that time it was big land. There were some trees, that's all. So Prabhupada desired, Krishna, if I ever get this land, I'll make a big temple for you. So at that time it was jungle. Still Prabhupada being a pure devotee, has such intimate connection that he prayed to the Lord that if he so desires, he may get this temple fulfilled. And eventually Prabhupada got the land. He had to fight a big battle. And then Prabhupada constructed a big temple. So the point is that not that you give up desires, you change the nature of your desire. Anger. Krishna is saying in this verse, become free from the influence of anger. All over the world as we travel, people ask, Swamiji, how can I give up anger? The wife will come and say, my husband is chanting, but he can't give up anger. And the husband will say, oh, my wife chants, but she can't give up anger. So everywhere someone will be there saying, anger is a big problem. Vasha Gora Toda problem for them. So why is anger? Why do we become angry? When does a child become angry? When he can't get what he wants. When do the workers go on strike? Of course now they don't go on strike. These days they don't go on strike because if they go on strike, they'll be worse off. They'll be worse off. But they used to go on strike where they won't get the wages they thought they deserved. So generally, people become angry when they can't get their quota of sense enjoyment. So when Krishna says, give up the forces of desire and anger, it doesn't mean you stop desiring, it doesn't mean you stop anger, but don't become angry because you can't get your quota of sense enjoyment. And become angry only when the Lord is being blessed. Just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advocated humility. He advised us to be more tolerant than a tree. But the moment Lord Chaitanya found out that Nityananda had been attacked, he came there instantly. And he was ready to take action. So anger also has a place, but anger should not be misused. So the force of desire and anger must be checked. Then it will make you happy. So Prabhupada says in the purport that one who can control the desire, anger, he is a Goswami. And one who can tolerate the urges of the senses. The 6 types of anarthas that the scriptures identify. Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Matsarya. That is lust and greed, envy, hatred. So all these are stumbling blocks of the path back to Godhead. Therefore these anarthas must be eliminated. But they cannot be eliminated unless you have a positive alternative. And because these anarthas, the execution of bhajana kriya, the following of rules and regulations, is the medium through which the undesirable elements in their heart are made to disappear. So Krishna is saying, please give up your desires and anger. And we can give it up if we are engaged positively. Krishna says, if you give up desire and anger, and if you control your material senses, then you will become free from the samsara of birth and death. So why is Krishna saying this? To inspire us to come to the point of bhakti, of surrender. It looks difficult, but it's not that difficult. So Krishna says, do all this before death. Now someone may say, I'll do it, but I'm in no hurry. I have Manogari money. So what should we do? Someone may say, I agree 100% with this verse. I'm going to control my mind and senses, but not now. I need time. So that's not the answer. The answer is that we endeavor to control the mind and the senses. And Krishna says, yeah, I'm ready to help anyone who helps himself. So Kama, this cannot be satisfied. Krodha, anger, this cannot be satisfied. How will you satisfy anger? Naturally, you can't satisfy these senses. But if you engage your mind and senses in spiritual activities, then you purify the their existence. Just like a devotee may be greedy for Krishna. His desire is to see the preaching expand. Devotee may desire to build wonderful temples for the Lord. So don't give up desires, but purify your desires. You can desire to have a 100-story skyscraper temple in Moscow. So you can keep thinking and desiring how Krishna consciousness can spread. So it's important that we be engaged in service all the time. So Prabhupada over here explains the above verse by saying, this is a path to make steady progress in Krishna consciousness. So the Bhagavad Gita identifies the problems, then identifies the safeguard. The problem has been identified, unlimited desires. This is our principal hankering. So a devotee, by constantly hearing about this philosophy, doesn't want to experiment with sense enjoyment. Rather, he tolerates this agitation. Now, the strength to tolerate the agitation comes from the execution of devotional service. It is just like when you engage in something positive, then anything negative doesn't attract you. Well, we're all attached to Krishna. Even the Karmis love Krishna. Last Sunday, I was in Vancouver, Canada. Have you heard of Vancouver? So we have a very big project there, an 8-acre project, right in the center of the city. It's one of our most beautiful projects in North America. So at the Sunday lecture, there were more than 100 students of the University of British Columbia who had come for the first time to an ISKCON temple. So after the lecture, they all had darshan. After lecture and prasad, they had darshan with me. And they all said, your prasad is super excellent. They said, we have to come back here every Sunday to have this prasad. And philosophy, really, we may not be able to accept it, but there's nothing you say that we can disagree with. So that is a reality. The reality is, if a devotee sincerely desires to spread the message of the Lord through the medium of book distribution, preaching, prasad distribution, Krishna reciprocates. So this verse is pointing out, please give up sense enjoyment. Tolerate the urges of the senses. Bhagavatam gives the example of somebody having an itching sensation and he feels like scratching. When he scratches in the beginning, he gets some instant pleasure. But then the disease becomes. So that's exactly what happens when you engage in sense gratification. That is, it makes the disease worse and gets you more entangled in the samsara of birth and death. One who is spiritually situated and happy in any condition and on the material platform, doesn't matter how powerful one may become, one is never really happy. So Krishna is saying, please tolerate the urges of the material senses. Rupa Goswami, in the very first verse of his Updesham, speaks as follows. He says, Vacho Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Udara Pasta Vegam. Please tolerate the urges. Just like Krishna here is saying, tolerate the urges. And if you tolerate the urges, then you can make spiritual advance. So one thing we said earlier in the verse, earlier in our discussion, the verse says that before giving up this body. So you may say, I'm ready to give up before this little body goes, but give me another 20 years. But can anyone guarantee how long one will live? I heard in your company now, insurance companies have entered the market. So go to an insurance company tomorrow and tell him, please guarantee that I will not die for another 25 years. Will they guarantee? Niyat, push him on. Push him on Niyat. Because no one can guarantee how long the next person will live. Therefore, Govinda Das says, Raja Hari Pada Netire. This human life is like a drop of water in a lotus leaf. It can fall off at any time. So he says, Vaja Hari Pada Netire. Take shelter of Lord Hari. What does it mean to take shelter of Lord Hari? What does it mean to take shelter of Lord Hari? To follow his instruction. Therefore, Govinda Das says, Vaja Hari Pada Netire. Take shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Hari. And how do you take shelter of Lord Hari? What does Govinda Das say? We are saying this bhajan all every day. Vaja Hari Pada Netire. Take shelter of Lord Hari through the medium of the ninefold process of devotional service. And this ninefold process of devotional service was first spoken by Prahlad Maharaj. He speaks about this in the Bhagavatam. So, Vaja Hari Pada Netire. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smarna Pada Sevanam Archana Vandam Darsam Sakyam Atma Nivedam. This is the medium through which we take shelter of Lord Hari. So one who is Krishna conscious, he doesn't get disturbed even when there are some reverses in life. Today, one devotee was talking to me and he mentioned how another devotee, his business wasn't doing well. So he told me, this devotee said, if I would not have been a devotee, I would have probably committed suicide. But now that I'm a devotee, I'm taking it very coolly. So that is a fact. When you become a devotee, you can see things in the right perspective. You see through the scriptures, and this is known as Shastra Chakra. If you begin to see everything through these scriptures, then to follow this verse will be very easy. But if you're trying to see this verse through your mature mind and senses, then it will remain a theoretical model to you. So what does it mean to see through the eyes of the scripture? I'll practically try to explain it to you and summarize the verse. Senses are saying, give me better standard of satisfaction. Show me better movies. Give me something better to taste, etc. You say, these senses can never be satisfied. So why should I do irreligious activity? When a great sage like Rupa Goswami says, Kamatina Patina Kalita Purni Desa, Rupa Goswami says, I have tried to satisfy my senses, but it's a long time, but I have failed. So we have a positive way of satisfying the senses versus the materialist path of satisfaction with material techniques. Our positive approaches engage the mind and senses in service to the Lord. To the eyes, we see the beautiful form of the Lord, especially the form of the deities. To the tongue, we have Krishna Prasad, Solka Krishna Prasad. And to the tongue, we vibrate the glories of the Lord and preach the glories of the Lord. To the ears, we hear spiritual sound. To the nose, we smell incense of flowers offered to the Lord. And if one is a grihastha, then according to religious principles, one can have progeny. So, and our desires are to become Krishna conscious. Just like it is said, the materialist suffers from the disease of hankering and lamenting. So similarly, a devotee is also hankering and lamenting. He's hankering to become more and more Krishna conscious. And he's lamenting that I have spent so many lifetimes independent of Krishna. Now, I don't want to waste even 1 minute. Therefore, Chanakya Pandit has told us, a minute lost cannot be made up with the wealth of the entire world. So don't waste a minute. Time and tide wait for no one. What does it mean, don't waste a minute? Don't sleep more than necessary. Don't eat more than necessary. Don't engage in prajalpa. Do not over-endeavor. So have desires, but have desires to carry out the mission of the Lord. Yeah. And anger? Don't become angry when you get insulted. Rather become angry when Krishna consciousness is being impeded. So you may say, Swamiji, it's easy to talk. We've heard this. There's nothing new in this verse. Actually, I'm just sticking to the points of the verse. The verse is talking about these points. And this is not the only verse with this purport. There's so many other verses with a similar message. So these verses are there because if you apply intelligence, then how you can control the mind and the senses. In the Bhagavatam it is said, the same activity we applied in a therapeutic manner becomes the cure of the disease rather than the cause. So that gives you a bath. And obviously all of you are here because you want to endeavor for self-realization. Whether you're a brahmachari or a grihastha, whether you are working full-time for the temple or you're a congregational devotee, this verse is for all of us. All of us who want a perfect human life. Do not underestimate the potency of the holy name. Do not underestimate the potency of chanting. So if we sincerely endeavor, Krishna will reciprocate. And there's so many stories in the Bhagavatam to support this point. You read how the fish gets trapped to death by trying to eat without restriction. You read how the deer how the deer meets his death by being attracted to the tune of the cunning hunter, to the melody produced by the cunning hunter. The bee gets attracted to the lotus flower and gets trapped when the lotus flower closes. The moth gets attracted to the light, goes to sit in the light, and it gets burned by the heat of the light. And the elephant chases the she-elephant, falls in the ditch, and gets killed. So these examples have been given in the Srimad Bhagavatam to make us understand that if we follow in the footsteps of these animals, then our end is going to be similar to theirs. So please, with folded hands, we want to beg you, on behalf of Prabhupada and the spiritual masters and Krishna, to please try hard to live up to this verse. One thing that will help you is, if you always remember Thakur Bhaktivinoda's concept of mature life. Thakur Bhaktivinoda said the devotee is pessimistic. He's pessimist about any endeavor to find real happiness in mature life. Just like someone told you, if you can find water in the desert, you will not believe it. So similarly, a devotee knows, doesn't matter what they are promising me, my senses will never be satisfied. On the highway, you see all these billboards. What do these reclams try and make you believe? Try me and become happy like these pictures on the billboard. But do people believe these reclams? No, they know it's exaggerated. So similarly, we must know that what these senses are trying to do is not going to give me real happiness. So as we execute devotional service, beginning with chanting, hearing, etc., we will automatically get the strength to control the mind and the sense. All good qualities develop in a personality that sincerely endeavors to do devotional service. So please endeavor, try hard, and you will succeed. Because Prabhupada has created a wonderful institution where you can succeed. Within this great ISKCON society, we have wonderful temples, nice devotees, nice prasad, plenty of service, and plenty of philosophy. So take advantage of it, and success is coming. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.